Now, we all know how difficult it is to rise up to the pinnacle, to the very top of a grading or an assessment. But difficult as that may be, it is far more difficult to maintain that grading for a long time. For about 5 years now, Nigeria has been on the Grade A list of the United Nations grading of human rights performances across the world. Now, that may sound strange to people, but that is not to say that there are no human rights violations in Nigeria. What the UN looks at is that in any particular country, are there institutions put in by the state to respond to any form of human rights violations? And from that grading, Nigeria is on the Grade A list because there are institutions put in place by the state to respond to any human rights violation, whether by state or non-state actors. Now, to maintain this grading, all hands are certainly on deck. And the recent hand that we have seen is the passage of a new act for the amendment of the National Human Rights Commission bill by the National Assembly. That was done just a few days ago. And that is going to be our focus on the scale today. Welcome to the program. I am Femi Okeowu. For any action to be able to succeed in any setting, there must be an enabling environment, and possibly the enabling environment should be the law that governs the establishment of this institution that will respond. And in this case, we're talking about human rights violations. In Nigeria, there is the National Human Rights Commission Act, which had been on for, the last one we had was the 2010 Act. Now it has been amended and harmonized, and the Human Rights Committee in Nigeria is very excited about this. So we decided to go to the National Assembly and see what informed this beautiful step taken by the National Assembly. The chairman of the Judiciary and Human Rights Committee of the Senate, Senator Opeyemi Bamidele, sponsored the bill, and in fact, we have a soundbite of his reading of the third reading for that bill as delivered at the Senate.
On a bill for an act to repeal the National Human Rights Commission Act, Cap N46, Laws of the Federation of Nigeria, 2004 as amended, and enact the National Human Rights Commission Act 2020 to strengthen the Commission to conduct investigations and sustain contributions to the Human Rights Fund for human rights activities in Nigeria and for related matters, SB 586. The National Human Rights Commission Act Repeal and Enactment Bill 2020 was sponsored by distinguished Senator Michael Opeyemi Bamidele, Ekiti Central Senatorial District. The bill was read for the first time at the plenary of the Senate on Wednesday, 2nd December 2020. And to also add that this is a stakeholders bill emanating from the National Human Rights Commission itself. The Senate at its plenary sitting on Thursday, 17 December 2020, deliberated on the general principles of this bill. Thereafter, the bill was read for the second time and referred to the Senate Committee on Judiciary, Human Rights and Legal Matters for further legislative action by Senate Order of Referral dated 24 December 2020 to report back with its recommendations. The objective of the bill, in a nutshell, is that it seeks to repeal and enact the National Human Rights Commission Act 2010 as amended, with the main objective, in our own opinion, being to reposition and streamline the institutional framework of the Commission by strengthening its capacity to conduct investigations on human rights issues, as well as expand the scope of the Commission's operation generally. The bill also makes specific provisions to provide for the establishment of the National Human Rights Fund in the national budget, as well as provide effective means of sustaining contribution to the fund, whereby non-governmental organizations and multinational corporations will make remittances to the account accordingly. The Human Rights Fund, which the bill seeks to establish, is in line with global practices as it relates to human rights institutions worldwide. The fund, no doubt, will facilitate unhindered and seamless discharge of the statutory functions of the Commission in line with the Paris Principles. This is important in view of the rising spate of insecurity, sexual and gender-based violence, and other unforeseen human rights violations in the country, which cannot be contemplated and adequately budgeted for during consideration of annual budgets. Distinguished colleagues, having regard to views canvassed at the public hearing and our subsequent clause-by-clause analysis of the provisions of the bill, we hereby make the following observations and findings. 1, that all the stakeholders who attended the public hearing supported the passage of the bill, albeit with some suggested amendments, which were accordingly reflected in the draft bill for the approval by the Senate. 2, that the propositions in the draft bill are ingenious, novel, and innovative, and if supported by this hallowed chamber, the National Human Rights Commission will no doubt be further strengthened to meet the challenges of modern realities. 3, that as the world has evolved over time, criminal activities and human rights abuses and violations have also evolved. Hence, the need to have the appropriate legislative framework in place to mitigate the rising spate of violence and disregard for human rights and dignity as the rest of the world are doing currently. 4, that a viral and enduring democratic value system cannot be fully entrenched in Nigeria if we do not have an independent and incorruptible human rights institution with adequate funding mechanisms and free from unnecessary interference from the government. All these are the contemplations of this proposed bill. 5, that one of the salient provisions of the bill is the aspect that has to do with investigations and conduct of public hearings on human rights issues and abuses. 6, that in order to stimulate the support of Commonwealth as it relates to national institutions and structures responsible for the promotion and protection of human rights, it is incumbent on the legislature to bring about legislation that are in tandem with global best practices. And finally, that the passage of this bill will further guarantee the Grade A status granted to Nigeria by the United Nations General Assembly.
For an act to repeal the National Human Rights Commission Act, Cap N46, Laws of the Federation of Nigeria 2004 as amended, and enact the National Human Rights Commission Act 2020 in order to further strengthen and reposition the Commission for effective and efficient performance of its statutory functions and for related matters 2022, third reading taken, and the bill is hereby passed. Congratulations.
Now, of course, we want to look at the bill and see why the great excitement at the passage of this bill. And so we decided to walk up to the Executive Secretary of the National Human Rights Commission to talk to him about some of the exciting areas of the new bill. Executive Secretary, want to say congratulations. The National Assembly just passed the bill, the Human Rights Amendment Bill. How does it come to you first?
Well, we want to thank the National Assembly for the passage of the bill. this is a heartwarming news to all staff and governing council members of the National Human Rights Commission. We know that the bill is going to change the environment for protection of human rights in the country. So it's a very welcome development.
What are the exciting things about it? Of course, the National Human Rights Commission has always had an act guiding its establishment and functions. But what are the exciting things about this new bill?
Well, the exciting things are for the researchers,
Yes.
for the people in research, for those who are interested in the mandate of the commission. It has now harmonized all the old act amendments and so on and so forth into one legislation. So you don't have to be looking at different legislations to know which section was repealed in this one and this. Now you just have one legislation that will give you at a glance the entire picture of the legal situation about the National Human Rights Commission. That's one. Secondly, there are some monumental development in the area of protection of human rights, because it gives the commission more powers to investigate and compel evidence to be able to arrive at decisions on human rights violations. And then it also makes provision for training, both law enforcement agents and civil society members on human rights and staff as well. And it also provided for what we call the Human Rights Fund. Now, the Human Rights Fund is a fund for because you can never plan fully for human rights violations. A lot of violations are accidental. They are, for instance, the NSAS protest. Nobody could have put that in the budget for that year. No, like the COVID-19. And of course, which affected human rights protection in the country, SGBV on the rise, law enforcement, impunity on the rise. Nobody could have provided that kind of something in the annual budget. So this Human Rights Fund is a pool of resources that can be used to deal with such issues of human rights violation if they come, so that you don't have to wait for 1 year to pass before addressing it. And the Human Rights Fund is a clear picture that protection of human rights, yes, is the duty of the government. But we are also all interested as citizens of the country. Corporate individuals, businesses affect human rights, and so on and so forth. So there is nothing wrong in everybody contributing and supporting the protection of human rights, because if the climate supports human rights protection, it will boom businesses. Businesses thrive better if there is protection of human rights. So that fund is going to be contributed to by all facets of society, so that at the end of the day, it will help to provide a good environment for development in the country, for businesses, for every facet of our life. So that is the main thing that legislation is bringing on board.
Since its inception, the National Human Rights Commission has always had an issue with the enforcement of its decisions. Does this bill address that area?
It does substantially address that, because the bill, though this was introduced in 2010 amendment, which says that decisions of the Human Rights Commission can now be registered as a decision of the High Court and then made enforceable as such. But the 2010 Act did not prescribe expressly how this was going to be achieved. Now, that gap has been cured by the present Act, because it states it's going to be done by an application, motion on notice, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
It defines the process, okay, which will activate the realization of that enforcement improvement. And of course, the Human Rights Commission is also discussing with the judiciary, on a practice direction that will help to smoothen the operations in this regard.
So finally, because this interview is basically on that bill, what would be your appeal and your hope for assent for the bill eventually?
Of course, we appeal to the federal government, we appeal to the president, we appeal to the attorney general, who the ball is now in their court. Once the National Assembly transmits this to the president, we believe that the attorney general will be able to look at the bill and support the commission so that this can be given assent. And this bill is going to help the government a lot, because you will agree with me, the last time we met the president, and the president knew that the commission was operating in the 36 states, the president had said that if the commission is assisted and empowered to help him solve the problem in all these 36 states, that it will lessen the problem on his table. So this bill, by providing for the commission to be able to deal with human rights violations across the country, will lessen the challenges of security. It will lessen the challenges of impunity in the country. It will lessen the challenges of injustice, which is what a lot of people are reacting to. And that will help in governance. That will help the government of the day to rule better. So this bill is a monumental step. If it is signed by the president, it will help to change the climate of protection and promotion of human rights in the country, and that will bring good governance and the so-called dividends of democracy to the people.
How involved was the executive arm of government, like the Attorney General's office, in the putting together of this bill?
Yeah, the consultations that were done along the line involved the Office of the Attorney General. It involves other MDAs. Of course, the public hearings were had in the National Assembly. The Office of the Attorney General was there. Other MDAs, civil society, everybody has been carrying along in the preparation to this bill. And of course, the National Assembly also saw the essence in making sure that this bill has been passed.
Thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you very much.
Yes, we are hoping and expecting that the president will sign this bill into law in a very short time. But on this program, we can take a look at the thinking of the president. Sometime at the last quarter of 2021, the new board of the National Human Rights Commission paid the president a courtesy visit. And from some of his declarations at that meeting, we know that it might not be long before the president signs the bill into law. So let's hear some of the comments that the president made when the 5th Governing Council of the National Human Rights Commission paid him a visit in October 2021.
As you are aware, Mr. President, the National Human Rights Commission was set up in fulfillment of Nigeria's international obligation to the UN General Assembly, Resolution 48-134. This therefore underscores the strategic importance of the Commission to Nigeria at domestic and international levels. The Commission, in collaboration with ministries, departments, and agencies of government, civil society, and development partners, have developed a national action plan for the promotion and protection of human rights in Nigeria for the year 2022 to 2026 to respond to the challenges of human rights at institutional, policy, thematic, and programmatic levels in Nigeria. Your Excellency, addressing human rights issues for a huge country like Nigeria requires adequate funding, as well as operational and institutional capacity. It is in recognition of this that the National Human Rights Commission Amendment Act of 2010 provided for human rights programs, provided for the establishment of a human rights fund to provide financial support for human rights programs and to provide justice and compensation to victims of human rights violations. The Commission is working towards the operationalization of this fund, and we appeal to Your Excellency for your support and traditional commitment to make it a reality.
it will show how seriously they have taken some of the extra-governmental organizations that help the government to articulate positions on what receive a lot of publicity. The composition of your committee is very interesting. It covers the whole spectrum of governance, and this is very interesting. So how I wish people will understand and appreciate the commission and pass the representations through you, so that I will have less hectic time in government. I'm very pleased that we have the facilities throughout the country. This is very good. I'm very pleased with the way you approach it and the way you make sure that you are on the ground in every state. The composition, as I mentioned, is all right. Human Rights Commission funding. We'll try and see which minister is supposed to be working with you and find out within our limited resources what we can honestly do for you. Thank you very much.
That's our look on the scale today. We have tried to paint a picture of what the new National Human Rights Commission Act would be like when it is signed into law. But for now, we're still looking at it as a bill from the National Assembly, and it is hoped that this bill and law, when it comes into action, will help to cement the human rights position of Nigeria, both internally and externally. Thank you for being part of the program today. More issues again would always unfold in the judicial sector and the law sector of Nigeria, and the scale is one area where you can trust you would find an update on them. We'll see you again in subsequent edition.